So this, we're not going to belabor this, but some of you guys have probably seen this before. I'm sure everybody's had chemistry. See a couple head nods like, oh, it's happening. So bad memories, right? So guys, first thing we're going to talk about is a little bit of biochemistry. I'm not going to get super in-depth into all this because honestly, probably most people don't care. But one thing that you need to realize is your body's going to be fueled off what's called ATP. All right, so that's adenosine triphosphate. So essentially, anytime we do any type of activity, we are basically splitting ATP molecules, and that creates the energy that we need to move. All right. So ATP is comprised of an adenosine molecule and 3 inorganic phosphates. All right. So what happens is when we need energy, those phosphates are cleaved. All right, and it breaks off, and that releases energy for us to utilize. We talked about creatine the other day. Okay, so that's why people take creatine, is to have more inorganic phosphates floating around, basically, so it binds back to that ADP, so adenosine diphosphate or adenosine monophosphate faster, and basically that helps you sustain activity for just a little bit longer period of time. All right, so it's not that creatine makes you stronger or makes you, better necessarily. What it does is it gives you the opportunity to extend the duration of an exercise by maybe, one more rep, okay, or 3 to 5 more seconds. So all those, extra reps that come in over time build, and the total volume goes up. So again, it gives you the opportunity to get better. So that's how that actually works for your body. Okay, I've actually had people take creatine before and just say, "Man, I'm taking creatine." Well, what else are you doing? Nothing. And so they're just taking creatine because I think they're going to get big. I'm like, well, it's a cell volumizer, so you might gain some water mass, but that's about it. So yeah, got to actually do something. So it's kind of a downer. But so basically, with ATP, the body is going to store different types of nutrients in order to create that ATP. All right, so the 3 energy-bearing macronutrients are really what we're going to spend most of our time focusing on today. But that's going to be your triglycerides or your fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. All right, so again, you guys have probably all heard this before. It's probably not earth-shattering, but when those are those constituents in our bodies are what's going to help create that ATP to facilitate having the energy we need to function. Okay. Now, some of those sources are going to be more ideal than others. All right, so during high-intensity activity, which one of these do we think we burn the most of? So fats, proteins, or carbs? Yeah, it's going to be carbs. So predominantly during high-intensity bouts of activity, we're burning mostly sugar, which is carbohydrates. Okay? As the duration of that activity starts to increase, we start to burn more fat in that regard. Okay, so we're still going to burn predominantly sugar, but fat's going to kick in to help support the long duration or the long nature of different types of exercises. So usually that's what we think of like with aerobic exercise. All right, if we go long enough, okay, or if we have an energy deficit, then we can also get it from protein. All right, but that's going to be probably the source that we do not want to get it from, because typically what that is that's the degradation of lean muscle tissue in order to facilitate energy, or to create that energy. So basically what happens is protein goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, which is basically the creation of new glucose. All right. So what happens is those amino acids get broken down, recombinated, and then it's forming basically sugar to burn in the body. All right. So as we said before, we want to have a good engine, or a decent sized engine, to help produce for us. If we start doing anything to break down that engine, then that could negatively impact performance in the long run. All right. So majority of the calories that we want to help form ATP, we really want to come from carbs and fat, ideally. All right, so energy needs. So looking at the different energy pathways. So in real simplistic terms, we've got 3 energy systems that we primarily deal with. Okay, so we've got 2 anaerobic, 1 aerobic. What's the difference between anaerobic and aerobic? Yes, sir? Anaerobic's without oxygen. Right, so anaerobic's going to be without oxygen, aerobic will be with oxygen. The thing I need you guys to remember is the only thing that's going to be really, truly 100% anaerobic is being dead. Okay? Because you're going to need oxygen in some way, shape, or form to just function and to live. But the amount of oxygen that we're going to need to perform these different exercises is going to vary. All right? And if you don't believe me, go run a 40 and hold your breath. See how that works out. Okay? You're going to have some. So even though it's about 90% anaerobic, there's still about a 10% contribution from the aerobic energy system just to be able to move and to function. Okay? Those 2 anaerobic energy systems, okay, are going to be the ATP-PC, or the phosphagen energy system, or the glycolytic energy system. Okay, a lot of people call that fast glycolysis, glycolytic. It goes by a couple of different names. Seems like basically we call it a lot of different things because whenever people catch on to it, we want to sound really smart, so we give it a different name so it confuses people and we seem smarter. So, but we'll talk about those a lot today, and essentially we're talking about the same systems, all right? But we'll clarify as we go. So looking at with the phosphagen or the ATP-PC system, basically that's going to be utilizing the stored ATP that we have in our body in order to produce energy in emergency type situations. Okay, so very, very fast and explosive movements. Okay, so if somebody were to pick their water bottle up and throw it at me right now and I dodge that, that's going to be using the phosphagen energy system. Don't do it. But that's going to be using that system because, again, that's the immediate energy that I have stored right now just to respond and react to that situation. In the context of like athletic performance, a lot of times we'll associate like a 40-yard dash, vertical jump, lifting something really heavy would be associated with that energy system. So the benefit is you got the average male has about 3 ounces of ATP stored in their body. So based on the average male, so somebody who looks about like this is going to have about like a deck of cards worth of ATP in their body. Okay, so I can draw upon that for those quick situations. However, if I want to extend the duration of the activity out, then I'm going to have to go on to other sources to get that ATP. All right, so that's going to kind of funnel into that second anaerobic energy system, which is going to be the glycolytic energy system. Okay, so with that system, basically, it's going to start tapping into the stored glucose and glycogen that I have in my body, so the stored forms of sugar, breaking that down, and the net product of that will be about 2 to 3 ATP. Okay, depending on whether I start with glucose or glycogen. All right, so the good news with that is, if I need to extend the duration of an activity out, then I can do it and still remain at a relatively high intensity using that glycogen energy system. The challenge is there's kind of a rate limiting factor there, okay? So that's only going to last for so long a period of time. So normally, with the ATP-PC system, depending again on what textbook you look at, we usually associate that with about 10 to 15 seconds of like really high intensity activity, so like 90 to 100% efforts. With the glycolytic energy system, that's going to be high intensity efforts, but about 80 to 90% of what your max effort is. Okay, so you can extend that out for about roughly 120 seconds or 2 minutes or so. But after that, if we want to keep going, we got to slow down again. Okay, at that point, when we slow down, that's when we start really tapping into that aerobic energy system. Okay, to help sustain the activity for a longer period of time. So with that system, it's going to go through something called the Krebs cycle, or the TCA cycle. Goes, again, by several different names. But essentially, through that process, okay, it's going to use protein, carbs, and fat instead of just sugar that's used in that glycolytic system, okay, and just the stored ATP that's used in that phosphagen system. It's going to use all 3 of those macronutrients to help supply ATP for our bodies. So the other difference on that is with the glycolytic energy system, we said before that it's got a net 2 to 3 ATP that's produced from that. Well, with the Krebs cycle, we're going to get anywhere from about 38 to 42 net ATP when we're all said and done. So the benefit is you're going to create a whole lot more ATP so you can sustain energy for a lot longer period of time. What's the downfall? What's the negative thing about that? The intensity is not going to be quite as high. So if you need to do a high intensity bout, you're going to have to ratchet back up into those anaerobic thresholds again. But again, we know there's a shelf life on that. So a lot of times you have to kind of toggle back and forth between the two, especially with what you all are going to do, is you're going to have times where most of what you're going to do is going to be aerobic in nature. Okay, because it's not going to be at maximal efforts, but every once in a while, you're going to have to dig deep and you're going to have to tap into those. So basically, the longer that you can sustain those, and the higher your overall aerobic capacity is, the longer it's going to be before you have to tap into those anaerobic stores. Because we know once you get to the anaerobic zone, it's got a shelf life on how long you can sustain it. All right, so part of what we're trying to do here is build that capacity. So basically, if your aerobic threshold is right here, so this is all anaerobic, what we're trying to bump that up to this point. So now you got a lot bigger window of time before you have to tap into those stores. All right, but again, looking at it from a nutritional perspective, garbage in, garbage out. All right, so if you haven't, even if we build that capacity, if you don't have the right things in your body to fuel it at that moment, performance is going to suffer. And that's that's what I love about my profession, and the thing that I hate is it's not just as easy as like, here's my hammer and here's the nail and we're going to make it happen. It's really multifactorial. There's a whole lot of things that play into performance, and there's a whole lot of things that you have to be attentive to. Okay.